Hi guys, welcome to Fierce and Pretty. Honey here. And today I'm super excited because I get to do a walkthrough of yet again another of Cilla Conway's decks. And today the deck is the Book of the Dead Oracle. And if you know me, you know that I adore Cilla's artwork as I do Cilla herself. She's just, amazing personality and so insanely creative, and the way she uses paint and brushes and canvas, just they spark something inside me that I could have never imagined that a not very artistic person as myself could experience with just pieces of paper, cards, tarot decks, oracle decks. So whenever I'm doing a deck review, it's kind of in my own style, a bit different maybe. And today we are gonna talk about the concept of death, my thoughts on it, my journey with the concept of death and the afterlife. But then also on top of that, we're gonna look at this deck, like what it is, but on top of that, how to work with this deck. Because on the first idea, if you think about a full oracle deck of 48 cards, just talking about the journey of death, and you might initially get the thought that what I'm gonna do with this deck, how could I use this oracle deck in my, on a regular Tuesday. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that too, and I will leave all the technical parts like the box and the book and the shuffling of the deck till the end. So if you're interested in those, they will be at the end. So this deck is a journey, and different ways, the journey through death. And that's why I've piled these cards in different piles, because I'm going to show you these different journeys and walk through them, and then by doing so trying to weave it all together at the end. So it's not going to be just flipping through each cards one by one, but rather just walking one layer at a time with this deck. So this deck kind of divides into 4 different paths of dying, 4 different ways how it could look, because none of us know what happens after death, where we go. Everybody have their own opinions. Some people have experienced NDEs, and that's one big part of the companion book of this deck that Cilla wrote. And I highly recommend reading also the book. It helps you understand the structure of this deck, but also give the ideas. What are these different paths? All the cards are numbered, and this journey starts from death. And this is kind of how and where my spiritual journey started. The first book I ever read about what happens after dying was Peter Richelieu's The Soul's Journey. I read it in Finnish, it was an old translation, but that started the transformation for me. It's been years since I read that book, but immediately when I opened this deck and started delving into this guidebook and this deck, it reminded me of that book. And the first path of this that follows the death is a beautiful one. This is kind of the way that I would kind of imagine death being like. Just by thinking what I've heard of, because I'm also interested about the near-death experience, NDE stories, and what people have written about the death. But the second card here is the Spirit Rising. And guys, I apologize the lighting, but it's dark up here in the north now, and I'm struggling to find the good lighting in this darkness to do justice for this deck. But we see a light rising up. And the third card is called The Passage. And this is a beautiful depiction of the light tunnel that people seem to talk about when they talk about NDEs. And also one really common theme is when people who go through the tunnel, they meet somebody. And this card is called the greeting. And the fifth card, life review. Well, everybody knows the concept of life review. And this immediately makes me think of Cilla's card from the Shimmering Veil Tarot. So from the life review, the Ten of Earth from the Shimmering Veil. It's just, and this even shows you immediately how beautifully again these decks work together. I love the fact that whenever Cilla creates a deck, you can combine them, because when it comes to deck size, the sizes are similar, the colors, the art, so everything can be worked together. So at the end, if you have like Shimmering Veil and the Book of the Dead, and if you have like the Divas decks, the first or the second version, you can always combine them together and get, you know, massive tools with combinations of decks that make beautiful spreads. And from the life review, we go to Innocence Regained. And these images just make you feel warm, like dying could be the pleasant experience that some NDE people say it is. The reunion card, it just melted my soul, even though it's one of the rare cards in this deck where you really see a person in it. But there's the dog, there's the cat, there's a horse and a kind of angelic being on the background, and a bird. But as a person who has a dog and whom I love, you know, I don't know, more than anything, my dog is just my heart and soul. And that's why this card just speaks to my soul so much. And at least, I don't know, who gives a fudge what's, you know, what's real. I would love to imagine that when I die, that I get to see her again. At least that's so super comforting. And Cilla's view here in this deck, as we can see here in the 8th card of First Garden, it has kind of that Wiccan ideology there behind, that the people in traditional British witchcraft have the concept of Summerland, this beautiful lush garden. At least it looks a lot like Summerland could look like. And in the ninth card we have the Shining Tutors, kind of like an angelic being, kind of the beings of light that we hear so often about. The 10th card of the reality form was immediately my daughter's favorite, and I like it too a lot. And in the 11th card of unification, it's hard to see how many people are there hugging. Is it like two, the blue and the yellow, and then somebody there with them? But I myself haven't had an NDE, but I've had kind of one experience that really felt and looked something like this. And the last card of the first path is the Dance of Creation, which is really beautiful, and again really like Cilla's style, with the use of the colors and the light and the darkness. And then we jump into the second path, and this is the part where Cilla talks about the Summerlands, and here we can see kind of the beautiful scenery. But this journey, on the journey of death, starts the second path with confusion. And this is something that made me think about the Peter Richelieu's book, because there people died, and they died in different ways, and some people were immediately in that book feeling relief, and you know, like the first path, it felt, how they described it, like the first path But some people, when they died, they were confused. They didn't know what was happening, that were they dead, were they alive, depending on the circumstances of the death. And that book is fictionary book, by the way. But this made me think about the book immediately. From the confusion, the 14th card is the first dawn. So it looks like the confusion is easing up. And the 15th card of flying shows us two birds in blue sky, like dancing together. And when I said that, how about using this deck in a mundane reading, when we want to ask something not related to death from this deck. And so that's why I was really happy, because last night I had my guinea pig group. So we were hanging out with James Beanie, Manuela from Place of Stillness, Anna from Astro Lady Tarot, and with Lennon Smith. And I asked them that would they be my guinea pigs, because I'm not a massive oracle person. And I, as I said, I was puzzled with this deck in the beginning of how to use this deck when we are not asking questions about afterlife. And this was one of the cards that came, and it was interesting because nothing in this card when it came up made me think about death anymore. So it showed me 4 times that this deck can actually be used with just practical questions, even though it is the Book of the Dead Oracle. So that was surprising and really fun to experience with people who got to share their opinions on the card and their ideas and their interpretation. So we were doing like group working with this deck, and it was amazing. So thank you guys once again. And one card that kind of pops out of this deck is the bee. It's something surprisingly earthy in a kind of celestial afterlife deck. Then the second path continues in the 17th card, further up, further in. You could imagine this place being somewhere behind that journey. And here in the 18th card of Soul Family, again I have to dig up one card from the Shimmering Veil. Look at the 3 of Waters, 3 of Cups in the Shimmering Veil, and this Soul Family card. They kind of have similar meaning, but still different. But even because when I think of how I can use oracle decks with my tarot brain, but when I'm so familiar with Cilla's artwork, if I'm doing just a random oracle reading on a basic Wednesday and not talking about death, and this card comes in, my tarot brain picks up with the 3 of Cups or 3 of Waters in this deck, and so I can find some something to grab on, something that these images talk to me about that can be more mundane, like with the Ace of Air, Ace of Swords. Look at that next to the flying card, from this realm to the next kind of type of thing. And this freedom card number 19 it's just beautiful, and this is what I wish that we all get to experience on the other side. This would be amazing, because none of us really get to experience this here. So now, while we should be focusing on enjoying the earthly goods and enjoying the physical world and what this life has to offer, but to be able to experience this at some point would be amazing. Then the 20th card, the Shining Sea, was one of the cards that popped out yesterday with my dear guinea pigs also. And this was a perfect example again how this deck could be used in a Monday reading. And this card took us to another country by a beach. Then we jump into the third path, which starts with the card Lost. There you can see my fingerprints, but I don't know. It kind of looks like in the darkness, right in the middle of the card, there is somebody in a total darkness, like a shadow. Or it could be pitch black, but I see a figure there, a shadow, in a fog, in a deep fog. And that's kind of familiar feeling to many of us in just the daily lives, I guess. And fear. And I think that this card represents so well about the thing that we should be talking about, the death. I love the idea that Cilla created as an oracle deck around death. Because, you know, there have been the Egyptian and Tibetan books of the death, but nobody uses those anymore. People used to guide each other over to the other side. But nowadays we just keep silent and put our dying people to hospitals and leave them there and then bury them without even seeing their faces anymore. And still this fear is inside us. We are fearing of what will happen to us and what happened to our loved ones. So talking about these things, and I love how Cilla is visualizing these different options, that what it could be, that we get to deal with this concept. So we are not too afraid of dying to be too scared of living in the process. Then the card of Limbo was one of the cards that started this process for Cilla, and this is something that I experienced on this earth on my spiritual path, so I can totally relate on this image. And the 24th card of Dark Glass is it looking something, or is it a mirror, or is it like a window? These are interesting images. And then there comes in the 25th card the Psychopomp, guiding spirit to help the lost ones. And with this card, Cilla talks about, you know, Hermes Trismegistus, and I love Thoth. Well, Mercury, Hermes, Thoth is my favorite, but kind of that idea of having a guide if you are lost that will be there for you is really reassuring. And with the help of that Psychopomp, there comes the release and the 26th card. And this looks like it's getting brighter after all this confusion. And again, we find ourselves on a green meadow, in a forest, a beautiful place. And there's like a little pergola, or what you would call that, like where you can sit down on a sunny day and relax. And last card in this second path is something so important in every day, is the card of gratitude. Then we jump into the last path, the fourth path, and we can immediately see, when we see this whole path opening in front of us, it is a darker path. And it starts with the obdurate spirit. He doesn't look nice and he doesn't look pleasant. But what I love about this path is Cilla's bravery, how she talks about this path, that, you know, the world is not only filled with good people. It's not like every single person on this earth is trying to work on being a better person, working on helping other people, helping themselves, doing good deeds. No way. We have the people who only want to do bad things. And I loved how openly Cilla said in the book that at least she kind of wishes that these bad people would have this type of death. That, you know, it wouldn't be right that a person who has tormented other souls in unspeakable ways in this life could get immediately like something really nice. So at least I'm with Cilla here. I'm not as spiritual and forgiving and good person that I could be in this life while I'm alive, forgiving to people who really, really hurt other people. And I'd like to imagine that they would get what they deserve. And on the fourth path, the journey continues with this figure called Charon. I think in every mythology there is the one driving the boat over to the other side. At least in Finnish mythology we have it. And like in the Ukonpakka, we have the maiden, the death card of this deck. But it's kind of a different concept in this deck, because here it's waiting for the bad people, where in the earlier paths we had the light creatures waiting there in a beautiful light tunnel. And the third card of this path, 31, is the Valley of the Shadow. And well, the name of this card is kind of biblical, but it's depicting, you know, not a nice journey for the not nice people. And I think they should deserve that one. And I love how this is kind of like a story. Like if there would be a movie or a story where bad people would get what they deserve, and this is the ghost of the past that comes haunting them and gives them a life review that isn't as pleasant as in the earlier paths of this journey. But for them, the life review could be the river of oil and blood. There we see like faces drowned, all the tormented people that this person had hurt, and show to them what they have done. And if that would, you know, help them to learn and take the responsibility that they didn't take in this lifetime after their death, if they would then take the responsibility, as we all should do, we should take responsibility of our lives, of our choices, and not blame things on, you know, all the time blame our parents or blame this or blame that. You know, take charge and take responsibility. That would be my advice. Maybe they would get the second chance there. Maybe they could, you know, get the opportunity to do it better the next time, because there is no way that we can undo the things we've done, no matter how much we wanted to. But maybe if we could do a second try and do it all over, would we still choose things the same or not? And I see that Cilla has been able to find some mercy and given the opportunity of recovery even for the people who started their journey with this really dark figure through the dark journey. And here comes a part where I'm dividing this deck in a way that feels right to me, and I'm not sure if it's correct, but I would imagine the fourth part ending here. But there is no clear indication, at least that I've found so far. I haven't read the whole book. I've read the beginning and the end and skimmed through the cards, but I didn't want to read the card interpretations yet before I get to do my, you know, my initial impressions that I love to do with Cilla's decks. But so Cilla, if you're watching and if I'm doing an incorrect divide with the deck, sorry for that, and do comment down below if it should, you know, be cut from a different point. Because at least to my eyes, it was this point where the deck changes in atmosphere again, and we start to see light and beauty again after the bad people's fourth journey. And we see the card of breakthrough. Like this could happen to everybody, no matter on what path they are. If we are talking about this oracle as an oracle of the dead, but You see these cards again. This is a great example of a card that could come in a mundane reading and give you a great insight. Then there is the card of choices, like really Two of Pentacles or any sort of, cards of twos. This is kind of an ace moment. This is really a two moment when my tarot brain is ciphering oracle decks. And this is beautiful. Here even the bad people could get the choice, or as Cilla says in the book, and I like the idea of, like, she would imagine that not all the souls would be forced to come back to earth again. Maybe if there would be a choice, if we want to do this all over again, because imagining coming back to life, sometimes, some days I'm so tired that I feel like, well, at least someday we're all gonna die and maybe we get some rest then. But then when you start to imagine, what about if there will be an immediate reincarnation and we start again, and these exhausting thoughts. But I'm with Cilla also there, that I hope that we get the choice on what to do or not to do afterwards, if there is something after. And the 38th card is the card of farewells, and there is a lot of beauty in this. And when I've listened to people's NDE stories, they often say that they didn't feel attached anymore, attached to their body, attached to the people they were leaving behind. So kind of the farewells could be beautiful, but also the farewells that we will be leaving. I just lost my uncle on Christmas Eve, and I'm going to go and say my farewells into his funeral in a few weeks, and we also, have a chance to give our loved ones the opportunity to continue, not to hang on and just try to force them to stay when there is the time to go. And we come to the 39th card, and Saturnarium, if you're watching, you asked what was my favorite card. And I'll have to say that is this one, because this card was the first card of this deck that I saw, and it has a short story attached to it. I had this part in December where I was seeing a lot of dreams about babies, of being pregnant, breastfeeding, giving birth, and every night I was dreaming of babies. And I personally, I'm turning 40 this year. I don't want any more babies, and I got freaked out because I really don't want babies. But then I realized, when I was doing a tarot reading for those dreams, I realized that I was in a point of my life where I had kind of a new beginning happening to me, and it was so, comforting to realize that. And it was so funny because Cilla sent me a picture of this card, and it was right after I had had a conversation with Saturnarium about, I don't want to see any more babies ever again. I'm like, no more babies. And then this came to my messenger box as a Christmas greeting, and it was just pure synchronicity, and I can't help watch this card of this new soul without that story, having an effect on my opinion. And yes, this card, as much as it freaked me out when I saw it the first time, it is my favorite. And there is the freshness and the beauty in that new soul. And everybody have their own ideas on whether there is reincarnation or not, and are there old souls living in this world, are there new souls that aren't yet so advanced, and whatever. And I kind of have been leaning on that idea, the more I've searched my thoughts, the more I've read and learned, that I kind of think there is something to it of us living amongst people who are, you know, some are older souls, some are younger souls, and they have reincarnated in different phases, and we all have a different path of growth ahead of us or that we are going through. But here this fetus in the card of number 40 is called reincarnation. And then comes this really beautiful light card that, well, at least for me, immediately looks like Our Lady parts in a really beautiful depiction, and it's called the Heart's Flame. And there are so many layers in this card too. Then we go to the card of Group Soul, which was also one of the cards that pop in our readings. And it was interesting to see even how there can be synchronicity of a card that has the image, between the image and with the querent, because there was a statue that looked kind of like this that was linked into that reading. So that's also a part when, you know, when I'm trying to learn myself how to use oracles. But sometimes it could be just also in the image itself that there is the synchronicity of the card coming out. 43 is the Rainbow Bridge, which is, there's something really Aurora Borealis, Northern Light kind of feeling into this. There are a lot of mythologies with the Rainbow Bridge, Norse mythology being one of them. And that makes me think about the Norse gods. Then there's the image of the higher realms, but somehow this looks to me like a globe, like Earth, like a planet. Like if there would be a parallel universe where we get to continue. Don't know, but for me that looks like that. At least it makes it easier when you have some concept that your brain can understand where to try to put all the dead souls and the dead people going to. And then there is a crystal city, and the images keep on getting more celestial. Like here we would have the planet of, and there's the city kind of in it, and then there's the cherubim, like the angelic kind of creatures, or what you would call them. And I love the name of this card, the Elysian Light, and I'm really obsessed with the Elysian mysteries, and this just takes me in a journey throughout centuries and millennia back to Eleusis, and I love that for it. Maybe this was what they were after in those mysteries, and maybe that was something that they found out and what we've forgotten as a human race, and maybe somebody someday knew what we now are only guessing. And the last card is the Inmost Center, and to me this is kind of really beautiful depiction of my own personal kind of experience that I've had, where I felt the connection with everything, the unity of that moment of realizing in a short glimpse that maybe we all are connected in oneness. Alright guys, I know that this video is already long, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm still gonna attach to this end part the technical qualities, and then I'm still gonna do some readings. So just in case at least one people would be interested of seeing those, they will be here. The box is great. It's a really different shape than if we look like the Shimmering Veil Tarot. It has a different size of deck and a book, and also it's a different design from the Divas deck. I was first puzzled how to open it before I realized that it was a magnetic box. But as Cilla's decks always, she really takes time in the details, and this deck is beautiful even in the case. The journey from death to light. And at least I appreciate all these little details that make up the deck. Cilla's guidebooks are always amazing. I love how honestly and really personal way she writes these. And like in this one, she talks about this current phase that we have been living, starting with 2020 and with the coronavirus, even though they might be things that people in the future would have forgotten, but that has this part of our lifetime will have a great effect on all of us that will somehow be remembered forever in a way. And it has brought death to our doorsteps in a way that it hasn't been so common before this era. And then there's from each card a really long nice paragraph on the card and the art itself, and then also a possible interpretation, which I really like having with oracle cards, as they are newer to me, even though they are not a necessity. But it gives you, if you read it once, then you might have some sort of a baseline to build over on top of. And I love the fact that Cilla had here the reading, how she asked from this, like the deck interview, that I like doing deck interviews with my new decks, but Cilla is here sharing her deck interview with this deck. And I think I love the idea of sharing her spread here. Then there are examples of difficult readings, a reading about reincarnation, a reading about the soul's needs, reading for an unloved mother, reading for a client's life purpose, reaching out to a beloved therapist, a comprehensive family reading, a general reading combining decks, and then a grounding meditation. And I, at least, not being such an oracle person, I appreciate these example readings, and I think they will gonna give me a lot of ideas on how to use this deck in you know, not only figuring out the death things that are of course present in, at least in my life now. They are themes that have been ongoing and are present and that I am interested on experiencing, but I wish that I can find also ways to use this deck with lighter themes, that not only with the death. So then let's give it a shuffle. Again, like all Cilla's deck, it's gilded. Well, at least the ones that I have with the Shimmering Veil and the Divas, they have the similar feeling with the gildings. This is golden gilding, but it has this little rainbow thing going on. Because this deck has more cards than just, you know, bit over 40, it makes it easier to shuffle. I sometimes struggle with oracle decks that have like, I don't know, 42 cards or something, and if the card stock is thin, I'm really struggling with the shuffling because my hands are used to 78 cards. A really beautiful riffle, really beautiful. It works nicely, both riffle and hand over hand. So I've shuffled my Shimmering Veil Tarot. I'm going to divide the deck and do a 3-card reading. A little check into this year of 2022 of like card for the main theme to focus on, a card for the challenge, and card for advice to my 2022. And I have shuffled my Book of the Dead Oracle, and I'm gonna choose one card from this to see how I can combine it to this reading with the tarot cards. So with the main theme card, oh, I got the Chariot. Yes. And to me, this year has kind of like two main objectives, and both of them require from me to be able to stay on my course, stay on my path, and move forward. There is this real need of moving forward in this year, and I have goals that both really need this energy. So I'm really liking having the Chariot there and me in charge. And you know, with the two goals, well, we have the black horse and the white horse. That's nice, but I need to keep holding on if I want to, you know, nail both of these goals, because it could happen that either of these horses start pulling me into that one direction and then ignoring the other. But it asks me focus on this path with two goals for this year of 2022. Then what will be my challenge on here? Well, driving my chariot forward. The Hanged Man. Oh, I love this card, how beautiful it is in this deck. And there is always this stagnation that I attach to the Hanged Man card, and how there is in this challenge. Let's see when we see what the advice card is, but changing point of view, looking things through a different lens, but also there is the risk to be stagnant. There is no time to hang and be, because these past 2 years I've been really hanged man in my life. Like everything has been really stuck and I've had no way of moving forward, and so I don't get too comfortable, because it is easy to get kind of like institutionalized during these times, and you just want to stay in your comfort zone and you don't want to move. You get so comfortable on your sofa that you'd rather stay there than work on your goals. But let's see on the advice. That we got the Four of Earth. So I think, because there is a really material aspect on my goals also, but I think here the advice is to be mindful of, you know, of the way I use money, and be mindful on those things, but also because my goals are so opposite. The other one is not bound to, the other goal is spiritual and the other goal is earthly. So also there I see the advice not to hang on physical things only too much. So I think that's interesting, but the main thing here that I'm interested is to see how this card will relate to this, which is not here the main part, but let's see what we get. And here we get the reality of form. As I said, it was my daughter's favorite card. The reality of form here is, because how I say it linking to here, because I have two goals, which other one is more spiritual and other one is practical, linked to my daily life, and how this creating from idea to physical reality, how having that focus of the Chariot to be able to bring those thought forms, to be able to have ideas being realized in actual concrete level. Here I would use the word manifestation, even if it wouldn't be too overused nowadays. I think some of us have started to dread the word manifestation because it's been oversaturated all over. But kind of that idea of realizing that. And I want to read you a short part of the paragraph of this card in the guidebook. And it says, the interpretation here then might be that there are some truths too complex for us to understand at present, and we need to allow ourselves time to be open to whatever flows through to us in our lives. What confuses us one day or one year will clarify in another as we move to a different viewpoint. And I love here how this sentence in the guidebook, how what confuses us on one day or one year will clarify in another as we move to a different viewpoint. And yes, so see, even not an oracle person can find a way using this card. First with my own intuitive messages on it, but then seeing on the book that what catches my eye. And I think that sentence in the guidebook, caught my eye with this spread.